Alright guys, so we have a little bit of a different video in store for you today. We have a bunch of new exhibits that just came in. There's one last little space of wall that these are going to fill, and we figured why not make a video on how I build these out. So these come to me, as you can see, pretty much bare bones. They're framed out, glass track is on. So we're going to build these out, and you'll see how we make the bases that these sit on so we can move them around, as well as all of the lighting. I'll provide links in the description below to all the different LED lights we use, the basking lights, heat, all that stuff. So hope you enjoy this, especially for you do-it-yourselfers out there that want to learn more on kind of how to build out a PVC reptile enclosure.
I'll start this off by mentioning that all of the PVC building and framing of the cages, as well as the glass track, is all done locally by my friend Elazar Macias. He's here in the Phoenix area, and his business name is 5150 Reptile Cribs and Things, or 5150 RCT for short. You can find his business page under that name on Facebook, and best way to get in touch with him is to message him there. And the first thing we're going to do is build moving bases for the cages to stack on. We'll start with the construction of those. To build the bases, we use 1/2-inch OSB sheets. I had these rip cut down the middle at the hardware store. We just need to modify them to fit each cage footprint. Once cut, using 2x4s laying on their sides, we lay out the bones of the bases and make cuts using a miter saw. I mark out centers and use a pocket hole jig we pre-drill with our screw holes. We then screw everything together. Next, we apply a liberal amount of wood glue and sandwich the 2x4 frame between the two OSB sheets. I then apply several screws through the OSB into the 2x4s on each side, being careful not to hit the corners where the casters will go. Once everything is together, we go ahead and sand down the edges. After this, we mark out our caster placement and pre-drill the holes for the lag bolts that will sink them in. Once this is done, we go ahead and install all of the casters and check to make sure that it's level. That's it. Now it's ready for primer and paint, which will be black to match our PVC cages. We'll paint this one, and then it will take me a few more hours to build the bases for the other two stacks of cages. Alright, so I get asked quite a bit, little details like where do the vents come from that you use, the lights, what brand, yada yada. So I figured before I build this one out, I'll go ahead and walk you through that real quick. We'll put links in the description below so you can click and go right directly to where I get all this stuff. So anyway, as you can see, these cages come pretty much bare bones, and I install everything, and well, like I said, we'll build this one out. But before I do, these are 4-inch vents, a website called roundvents.com. They've got all different sizes, I think up to 6-inch as well. Yeah, these guys, being that this is a venomous snake enclosure, I put all the vents in the back. Only exception is these little 1-inch vents, same style, and a few of those go in the front just for a little airflow near where the glass ends up being. And these little guys, they kind of have these little ridges. They pop in really tight and nicely. These bigger ones, we do a little bit of silicone around the seams to get that nice tight fit. The lights, I love these lights. A company called eShine makes these. It's little puck lights, and they're really low profile, and you can daisy chain up to about a dozen of these together. So most of these stacks of cages, one plug will run a whole stack of cages, which is really nice. Only about 2 watts a piece. They don't produce too much heat, and yeah, good quality lights. Haven't had any problems with them, and really like those. And then I do like to give the rattlesnakes a basking option. So this is just a little light socket from a website called 1000bulbs.com, and we can run an incandescent or UV light off of that. Another thing, I don't like any cords inside the cages. If any of you have built cages and had cords inside, and sometimes snakes find a way between the cord and the wall and they pull it down, you got cords dangling and holes popping out the back for them to go through. So what I actually do is drill through the top, and we run the cables right out the top of the cage. So you don't see any exposed wires inside the cages. Makes it nice. Only issue with that though is then you have cords on top. You can't stack these on top of each other without putting some spacers in. So this is just little 1/4 inch pieces of hobby board, painted the end black so it match the PVC. And this creates just enough space to be able to run the cords right to the back and plug everything in, and no cords are getting pinched. And then there's more to it too. I'll do the glass, we'll install heat and all that, and I'll explain that when I get to it. But we're gonna go ahead and build this one beginning to end so you can see that process. I'm not saying this is the only way to build cages, but again, I'm picky on how I do it. Depending on what's going in each cage might determine if I need more vents or less vents. I also install little USB computer fans in some of the cages that need extra ventilation. All right, we'll get to it. All right, basking light goes at 10 inches. It's a nice thing with these this protective covering. I can write everything where I need it and see it easily. I go ahead and find centers and make my marks for all of the vents, lights, heat, and so forth. Once everything is marked out, I go ahead and pre-drill holes for the lights and vents. Using a 1 inch and 4 inch hole saw, I go ahead and drill out the holes for the vents. Heads up, this part is pretty messy. Next, I'll go ahead and remove all of the protective plastic from the PVC. Now here come the LED lights. These can be daisy chained together, which means one plug will light the entire stack. Being low wattage, they don't create too much heat and won't be blinding the animals. I don't like having any extra holes or cords visible in the enclosures, so I run the wires for these directly out of the tops of the cages. Now we'll knock out the basking lights. All right, so I get these off of Amazon. This is just like a switched power cord with stripped ends. And we're basically going to wire this to the little basking light or light socket for what will become the basking light. This part can be a bit tedious and must be done correctly. Once these are properly secured to their corresponding screws, we screw the socket into the ceiling of the cage. Now that all of the lighting is done, it's time for the top spacers. Since all of our cords are sitting on top of the cages, we can't simply stack each cage as it would pinch the cables. Therefore, using 1/4 inch hobby board cut to size, we screw these into the tops of the cages to act as spacers for the cables. You could also use strips of 1/4 inch PVC here. I then tape down an insulation layer to help lock in heat and also insulate the basking light cords from direct contact with heat tape from the cage that will be sitting above it. After this, it's time to do the belly heat option. Since this will be the bottom cage, I carefully drill a small hole for tight probe placement. Then I'll center and install the heat tape. So when you cut this, you gotta cut in between the black layers. The black is actually where the heat comes from. So you gotta only cut in the clear here. We get our heat tape and connection kits from Pangea Reptile. They have instructions on their website on how to install it, or they'll also do it for you. That's gonna run through that and that hole, and there's actually, you gotta get this between the copper and the bottom layer. And so usually if you just put a little pressure, we're gonna put that right in that groove. And then usually if I twist a little, it'll pop it open more, and then I can get the whole thing under there. Okay, so that's lined up. And put that bottom rivet right through that hole. And then the top piece. So now Pangea sells a crimping tool that you can use to crimp that. I'm going to do it the redneck way, and because I don't have that tool, and use my hammer to pound that down. It's not going anywhere. All right, now that we've got our ends firmly connected, you want to make sure this doesn't wiggle at all. It should be in there real tight. So hammer did the job. Probably don't recommend doing that way, but again, that crimping tool is the other way to do it. And then the last thing we're going to do is, it comes with these little electrical insulation pieces, and we're just going to cover that connection just like that on both sides. We'll adhere the heat tape to the cage using aluminum tape, and it's ready to go. Next, we'll go ahead and install the vents. The 1 inch vents have a tight fit, and so I just pop those into place. The 4 inch vents also have a good fit, but I like to apply a layer of black silicone or similar adhesive and then pop those into their corresponding openings. Usually I would move on to another cage and begin stacking before doing the glass, but for the sake of this video I wanted to build one cage from beginning to end. The glass gets cleaned, then slipped into the track. I mark out centers for tab placement and install the pull tabs. Then comes the lock. This is called a showcase lock, and you can find them online in different styles. Lastly, I go ahead and mark out / cut bits of weather stripping to fill in the space between the glass layers. Alright, so that does that. And then we got one little short one to do underneath the lock. Since this cage is one of 4 in a stack, we'll go ahead and repeat all of this until the stack is completed. Then we'll be able to run probes, link up the LED lights, run the basking lights, etc. Alright, so obviously a lot going on behind these cages. Might look a little crazy, but it is safe and organized. So basically what's going on, this stack's a little different. These cages are divided, so there's 2 things of heat tape. Most cages have heat tape down one side and basking lights on that same side, and really nothing going on the other side except for the LED string. Left side of every cage, a piece of heat tape, so that's what's here, and heat tape requires having a probe as well as power. So we run herpstats, which is this unit up here, and there's cables going down to this, one of them being power to the heat tape, one being a probe to measure the temperature, which then moderates the power that goes to it. These are the basking lights that are all connected to a power strip there, which is on a timer. And then the LED string is all interconnected. That just goes to one plug, which is up here. So that's what some of these smaller wires are. Alright, so had a little bit of free time and finally got all these done. So they're all built and they're ready for their future inhabitants. So we'll be decorating them and adding bedding and all that stuff here in the next couple days. Super excited for this last little chunk because this whole building, this is the last little hole, and so we got that filled in. There's now a full 360 wraparound of displays. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed watching this video. It was a little different, but we figured it'd be helpful to kind of show how we build these exhibits, all the details about the lighting, vents, and all that stuff. So anyway, hopefully it was helpful for you do-it-yourselfers out there, or anybody that's just simply interested in how these are made. So we're planning on getting back to more rattlesnake action in the future videos. We've had a lot of snakes drop babies, so the next couple we're planning on doing are about breeding season and all the babies we're producing here. We're also planning on doing a full tour video of the facility. So be sure to like, share, subscribe, and keep an eye out for those.